Welcome to Midlife Matters. I'm Marie, and each week I'm joined by my friends Julie and Mindy to talk about all the topics keeping women in the middle years up at night. Listeners, today we're talking about how to walk with a friend going through a difficult time. Whether it's a family crisis, sickness, job loss, natural disaster, or simply a dark season, we're going to attempt to unpack all the things that might trip us up when supporting a friend during hard times. Listeners, today we're talking about how to walk with a friend going through a difficult time. And this topic came to us as a listener request, and it's something that's touched our three lives recently in one way or another, and we wanted to talk about it here on the podcast. And whether it's a family crisis, sickness, job loss, natural disaster, or simply a dark season, we're going to attempt to unpack all the things that might trip us up when supporting a friend during a difficult time. And I know that I'm still learning how to do this. Julie and Mindy, are you guys experts yet?
Now, I wanted to make that very clear that I'm still learning, and that when I was a little hesitant to do this topic just because it's so fresh.
Mm-hmm.
And I also didn't want it to be like we are trying to educate people on how to walk with a friend, but I'm not doing it because I feel like my friends have not been successful. So I wanted to make that clear.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm definitely not an expert. I feel like you don't really learn until you go through the fire yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Like you just don't know what you don't know. And so
that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. And so I think that there are some things that we can all learn. And but I feel like this is a lifelong learning lesson.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And listeners, somebody else was out there thinking about this and wanting to know how they can do better. And I imagine there are a lot of listeners that also feel that way. I think that we all can learn something here. And I know I'm going to learn from you guys, and hopefully listeners, if you have good tips, you'll email us or message us and we can learn from you too. But we've all been there. And we say there, meaning like fill in the blank. We've all been where it's awkward and you just don't know what to say. And so tell me a little bit about when you guys have experienced this awkwardness. Can you think of a time when you might have said the wrong thing?
I'm afraid. I'm afraid to say the wrong thing right now.
Well, I'm sure I have. And unfortunately, I've often said nothing or too little when I was in doubt.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to talk about some do's and don'ts later, so I won't get into too much of that. But I do remember a specific time when I said the wrong thing. This was probably 20-something years ago. And that person let me know that I had said the wrong thing. Now, she didn't say it in a very instructive, helpful way. It was kind of out of anger. So I still didn't fully understand my mistake at that point. But I do now.
Mm-hmm. So you've learned.
So,
well, what
yes.
was it? Can you share a little bit about what you did?
Yeah, I was having lunch with her, and I had just had my first baby. So Molly's with me in the stroller, and we're kind of getting back to the car, putting the stroller in the car, and she just started crying, my friend. And she let me know that she'd had a miscarriage. I jumped right in trying to make her feel better.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And said, I don't know that these were my first words, but I shared a story of a good friend of mine who had had many miscarriages, and she now had 4 children. Mm-hmm. This was supposed to make her feel better.
Right.
And she said, that does not help me, Julie. She is that offers no comfort to me. And, and what she meant was that's not her story. She has no guarantee that that'll be the end, the end of her story. And I get that now. But at the time, I didn't. I was kind of hurt that, I was just trying, like you think about your intentions were good,
right?
But it wasn't received that way. So,
right.
Wow. I know I have found myself, I think I don't feel like I have a specific situation. I love that your friend quickly said something to you. It's hard to articulate when you're in a season of suffering, to your friends. But I know through ignorance, I have said all the, God must have something great planned for you, or, these, I would call them like these empty platitudes that I feel like we learn to say because you hear other people say them. And then when you're caught in this situation where you don't know what to say, all the awkward stuff, vomit comes out of your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, and so I definitely have gone through those seasons and I'll say when I was younger, much younger, kind of like you, like 20 years ago. But then I think I learned from that, and then I got too quiet. Like then I was like, well, I'm afraid to say anything at all because I don't want to say something hurtful.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really then took just a lot of maturity to learn how to try to listen and comfort in a more silent way, but also still saying something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was thinking that when I was younger, I was probably, I guess I was thinking, I hope with age I've become more sensitive, but I do know that I lean towards that type of person that immediately wants to spin it into something good for the other person, or say like that happy story of how it turned out for someone I heard about, or like that's just my personality, is just immediately let me try to make you feel better by talking this up or telling you a story. Like, Mindy, I'm thinking of when you said you were moving, I'm immediately like, oh, well, look at all these good things about moving. And you're probably like, I don't think any of them are good right now.
Gee, thanks, Marie. Super excited.
Right. Like, it's just my personality to be like, oh, let me, I don't want to see you hurting, so I'm going to tell you how you cannot hurt over this thing, when that doesn't really take away the hurt. Like, and also I really do like encouraging stories. Like for me, if I heard of, oh, well, this worked out for somebody else, and then I would maybe kind of tuck that away as a comfort, but maybe, other personalities are different, or maybe you just have to say those things at the right time.
Yeah, I was going to say Mindy probably needed that encouragement, maybe just not as the very first thing. Like she had to get ready to move, but then she really did need that. So timing is important.
Yeah.
And this does come out of like Julie, you mentioned intentions, and where you just mentioned too, that we are uncomfortable when someone's hurting, and your first response is you want to fix it. Like you really do want to make things better. And so it's out of that desire to make things better, to make someone happy, to get them out of that suffering a little quicker. And it's just that desire is sometimes not healthy, because sometimes people are suffering and they have to suffer for that season.
And I think we have to, if we're honest, ask ourselves, are we not comfortable with it? Like, are we saying these things because we're so uncomfortable with the tears or the silence or the awkwardness? It could be for them and it could be for us too.
True.
Yeah. If you're going through a difficult time and it's you yourself, do you think that you're good at articulating your needs? Like if someone asked you that question, Julie, like, what do you need from me? Would you even feel comfortable telling them?
Not really. I'm trying to do better because I've watched some other people do this and I'm reading a ton about this. But when you're going through a really dark season, your needs aren't easy for other people to guess. And you're really still trying to figure out what your needs are. It's not like you don't want to tell people, you don't even know yourself. And I think from what I've read, a lot of grievers spend a lot of time figuring out how to articulate their needs, like not wanting to offend their friends or make their friends feel like they're not doing a good job, or not wanting to be too much for their friends. It's just awkward to tell people what you need, especially when you don't even know.
Right. I do feel like, but Julie, would you say that you know what you don't need? Like you immediately know when something is offered that you don't need, and you're like, well, that's not helpful.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And we'll get into the do's and don'ts, but that's easier to spot than giving them an idea.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Can you think of a time, Mindy, where maybe you've had to educate anybody on what you needed, or we say educate in quotes, but just kind of be specific with what your needs were?
I think it's really neat when people have asked what I need, especially most recently in our season of job loss. It was helpful sometimes when a friend would say, well, what can I do? Because it's not like they could get Bryce a job, and I'm his spouse, and I'm his partner. And so obviously everything with him affects me and our family and the moves that we were going through. And so I just appreciated when a friend would say, "What do you need?" And I was like, "I just need to go for a walk and talk about other things."
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so people that would just be there.
Mm-hmm.
But it is hard to articulate what you need. You're like, "Well, I want Bryce to have a job." You know, I
Right.
don't.
Right.
But in the meantime, I'm really just living day to day,
Mm-hmm.
you know, moment to moment.
Yeah, I was trying to think of times when I may have spoken up, and I was just thinking about like times where I did require a lot of help in my life, like right before my fourth and fifth children were born, they're twins. 8 weeks before they were born, we moved. And I can remember that I accepted a lot of help packing, unpacking, setting up the house, meals. And then just a few weeks later, I accepted a lot of help, meals again, childcare. Like, I remember that was like a year of like accepting a lot of help and also having to be maybe specific about what kind of help was needed. Another time, my son was in the hospital for almost a month, and I remember I very specifically said, "We haven't all been together as a family, so is there anyone that would be willing to bring us a meal on Father's Day in the hospital so that we could all eat together?" That was a very specific call out, but people answered that, you know. But if I hadn't said, "Hey, I know this is an imposition, it's Father's Day, but people have asked what they could do, and this is something, that you could do." Another thing, more recently, I had a little surgery, and my sister was bringing me a meal, and she offered to bring me salad and rotisserie chicken, and she said, "If that's okay." And I had just gotten salad from another person, and plus, sometimes when you're sick, you don't want to eat a lot of salad, and so I just thought, if I get another salad, then that's going to be 3 salads. So I texted her, and I felt bad about being so specific, but I just decided she offered to help. So I said, "Do you think instead of salad, you could make potatoes? Like, I don't care if they're baked or mashed or something, And I felt bad because it's a lot easier to buy salad than it is to make potatoes. But I knew that they would get eaten. I knew that they would be helpful. And I'm sure that she was happy to do that. And if I hadn't have been specific, I wouldn't have gotten potatoes, which we enjoyed, and the girls were happy to have over the next few days. And like it was a much bigger help to me than salad would have been. But I think a lot of times, that's a very small example, but I think a lot of times we're just like, "Oh, well, we don't want to put anybody out," when really the person wants to be helpful.
No, I think that's a huge example because you think, "Oh, I just want to be nice and just take whatever I get, like be grateful." But on the other end, nobody wants to prepare a meal that they know is going to go in the trash or never get eaten. You know what I mean? Like you think about that when you're cooking the meal, like you hope that they're going to eat it all and they're going to enjoy it. So,
right.
Yeah, I think that there needs to be more of that.
Yeah, I would rather have somebody be very specific with me. Like, I would appreciate that. If you just leave it kind of nebulous, I'm probably going to fail you because I don't know what the need is.
Right.
Yeah.
So get specific.
This wasn't one of our questions, but do you think it's easier to accept help? Like having a baby, you almost have grown to expect meals, like people just do that. But like a job loss, I bet a lot of people don't even notice, like, Mindy might need something,
Right. It makes people uncomfortable because in any type of suffering, if you haven't dealt with it, or even if you have, it's just like, it makes you uncomfortable because, you don't want to be there too. Like you don't understand that type of suffering if you haven't been through that type of suffering. But it just really makes people uncomfortable because this family that once was normal is now not normal.
Yeah. And if you haven't been through it, you don't know like all the ripple effects.
Right.
You think, well, I can't help them. I can't get them a job. But you think, well, what is it doing to your family time, your kids, your, the thought of moving and uprooting? Like there's just so many ripple effects that create needs.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that if somebody asks you, maybe if you're going through a season that's it's not real obvious like what you could do to help. Like if someone's sick or in the hospital or had a baby, we immediately go to meals. Well, they probably need meals. But I wish there was another list out there of like what comes instead of or after meals. Like what else would be helpful? Do you guys have any ideas? I'm thinking of like job loss. Like maybe it's helpful just, youth camp is coming up and that would be an extra. So maybe you can sponsor their kid or pay half of it or whatever, I'm trying to think of things that would be other than meals.
Yeah, there are tangible things, but I think there's emotional things that we have a harder time writing down, like just be my friend.
Yeah. But what does that look like, Mindy, for like the person that needs a specific?
I know.
Well, you mentioned a walk and you just sometimes you need to talk about something other than that thing.
I do. Yeah. Because that's on your mind all the time.
Well, that's the thing I was wondering is, should you bring it up? Like, does the person want you to bring it up every time or do they want you to pretend it's not happening?
That is so hard.
Well, hopefully if you bring it up, the person can say, hey, I want this walk to be about something else. Like, let's don't talk about that,
Yes.
It's probably nice to ask. And then if you can trust their answer.
Sometimes you want to talk about it and sometimes you just really don't. And it's hard to know.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess, as the friend, maybe we need to get more comfortable asking, what do you need? And as the person on the receiving end, we need to get a little more comfortable with being more specific.
Right. Mm-hmm. When we went through our miscarriages when I was a lot younger, I really did have emotional needs and there were tangible needs. Like I should have asked somebody to help watch Abby and Grant while I'm going to 1 million doctor's appointments, going through miscarriages. But like I suffered a lot more because I didn't know how to ask. I didn't know who to ask. We weren't near family. And so it's even more uncomfortable where you're like, well, there are friends. They're not supposed to have to do this. Like this is something I'd be more comfortable asking family. But, it's just like, you have to get past that. So I think that my suffering would have been eased in a sense had I been more vocal when I was younger. But again, I think that comes with maturity also, to be able to articulate and vocalize, the needs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, speaking of articulating needs, it can be kind of scary. Like, why do we fear asking for help? I kind of fear asking for help because what if I put the call out there and nobody helps? I'd almost rather not even bring it up.
That's exactly what I said. Like, what if they say no? Like, what if they can't or won't, and you still have that need and you've put yourself out there? Like, that's a scary place to be.
So, like, straight up rejection is one fear.
And yet, has that happened to any of us?
No.
We've asked? No.
I mean, maybe they can't do it in the exact way you thought or at the exact time, but like usually people don't just say, no, I'm sorry, I can't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I worry that it's too big of an ask. I mean, even if it's dinner, I worried my family was too big. Like, well, like they're going to have to make a lot of food, like
right.
there's 6 of us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, that's just too much. That's too much to ask. Or babysitting, or, whatever it was, or bringing a child home from something, that I just couldn't get to. So anyways, yeah, I just worry it's too much.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one thing that I tried recently, and this is on the other end, like someone else who had lost her husband recently, kind of after the normal time had passed, like the meal trains were over, she just kind of was on my mind. And I called her and said, I want to bring you a meal. What night would work? Instead of, can I bring you a meal or can I do anything for you? I'm here, like, and I was really surprised. She just said, yeah, like tomorrow night or Wednesday would be great. It was just, I think it just, when you say, I want to do this for you, it makes it easier for them to accept it. And I did that a couple of times, and I don't know, that's just something I want to kind of be on the lookout for. Like, when the normal grieving time is, not that there's a normal grieving time, but we'll talk about that later too. But when people kind of fall off, that's when people need to be remembered,
Right.
Well, are you afraid of tears? Like if your friend breaks down crying? or if you break down crying, like, I don't know, like, are you afraid of the emotion when that comes along with some of these things? Like, if you ask your friend what they need, or if they just need you to sit there in silence and they just want to cry, like, is that something that you're comfortable with?
I mean, I guess it's gotten easier after I've done it a little bit, but
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm more uncomfortable with me crying in front of someone else,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I put this question in here because I listened to a podcast by Kate Bowler,
Mm.
and she's a young mom who has stage 4 colon cancer. And so she writes a lot about this. And she said, I know what it feels like for your tears to form an invisible moat around your body, crossable by none but the bravest.
Mm.
And I thought,
Ooh.
that it's true. It's a scary thing to enter into that because you don't know what to do. And
Mm-hmm.
I think most of the time it's just sitting there, like giving somebody a place to fall apart.
Mm-hmm. I guess I sort of feel like I'm like an animal. If I'm wounded, you know how they always say animals just try to find like a quiet
Mm-hmm.
place where they're by themselves to kind of go to lick their wounds, or even just to die, like they just kind of slink off. So I don't know. Then I sort of feel like maybe that's how other people feel. Like, do they even want me there if they're breaking down? And.
Well, I think probably most people fit into that category. Like, I'm not going to choose that, but I guess there could be a situation where it just happens, like you just
Mm-hmm.
can't hold back tears.
Okay.
But yeah, I would definitely choose to. That's when I just get in my car and drive because,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to cry at home. There's people here,
Mm-hmm.
even like people that care about me. I
Right.
just feel like that's too much for them. Like a
Mm-hmm.
child or your husband who's sick, that's not for them.
Mm-hmm.
So driving in the car is great.
Right. Right.
I'm
Yeah.
sure the people on the road are like, that poor woman, what's wrong?
No. I know I definitely was more uncomfortable with emotion when I was younger. And I feel like I learned to like rein mine in and not show so much because I felt like I showed too much. And
Mm-hmm.
and people don't know how to handle that. It definitely was something I think as a woman, you kind of learn to rein in emotion a lot
Mm.
over the years. Like it's because you learn that your emotions make other people uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And we do tend to be more emotional creatures. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so that's something I think even just, our tears make people uncomfortable. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm comfortable more now with other people's tears.
Mm-hmm.
Like it doesn't bother me. I can
Mm-hmm.
still hear the words that they're saying. Like
Mm-hmm.
get past what's happening on the outside to try to listen to what's happening on the inside. But I know that Bryce has really encouraged me in our relationship. He knows I want to crawl into a hole, kind of like you, Marie, and just like isolate myself when I'm at those darkest moments where I just want to cry. And he's asked, he was like, please don't hide that from me. I want to be there during those times too.
Mm-hmm.
And that's uncomfortable for me.
Mm-hmm.
Even to let the one person who's my
Mm-hmm.
partner and love of my life, like let him into that, it feels so awkward, hard.
Mm-hmm.
Well, recently I've been reading a lot of grief bloggers and writers, and they all seem to say the same things. Like if I read 10 writers, I feel like I'm reading one because their sources of grief might vary. But, if they were asked, what do I wish people understood about what I'm going through, they almost always say the same things.
Mm.
And so I've kind of compiled a list of do's and don'ts from all that. And I think we can learn a lot from them. Like I'm learning how to help other people. And sometimes I feel like I'm learning more about what I want or need when I don't even know myself, because I can recognize it when I see somebody else express it,
Mm-hmm.
like, oh yeah, that's what I need, or or
Mm-hmm.
that's the way I should ask for that, or whatever. So yeah, so I thought we could just go through these and talk about the ones that have, personally meant something to us, or maybe ones that we thought, ooh, I could never accept that, or
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what should we not do, Julie?
Well, the first one was don't avoid saying anything or doing anything at all. And we've kind of talked about this, but I do regret all the times that I've just said nothing because it was awkward. what I'm learning is that people want and need to know that you're thinking about them. And I know as a griever, I feel very stuck in the present. Like the past is sad because I can't have that back. The future's sad because it's scary. So I'm just stuck right here. And everybody else is moving on. Like life is moving on fast. And so if nobody's mentioning your pain, it just makes it worse. Like you like to be remembered and like checked on. And I can even remember like after I lost my dad, somebody saying like wanting to talk about him or something is like, oh, I'm sorry. Is that too sad? And no, like, and this may not be a universal thing, but it seems to be true for a lot of people. Like they want you to talk about their person, like don't they want to hear their name? Like I wanted to hear my dad's name and stories about him. And because otherwise it's like they're just forgotten, So I do think that that's important, that you're probably not going to do the wrong thing by talking about someone they care about.
Yeah. You were saying like what we've done about things that we regret in the past about maybe how we've reacted. And when I was younger and somebody's parent died of what I considered unnaturally old age, 72 or older, I didn't really feel like it was probably a huge shock or problem. Like I just thought, well, that's the way life is. And yeah, they're probably sad, but I don't know, like as a young person, I mean, I'm talking like I already had my own kids, but in my own mind, I mean, I think even when my own mother's father died, it just seemed like, well, that was, I mean, it was unexpected, but like he was old and are you really surprised? Or like, I don't know. I didn't understand the grief of someone losing a parent who has, in quotes, lived their whole life. Now that I've gotten older and my own parents have gotten older, I don't even like to think about them dying, and they're in their 70s now. But I would never at this point, if they passed away, think, oh, well, they had a good life and I'm hardly affected by this. I would be terribly affected by it. But at the time when I was younger, even when your own father died, Julie, I don't even know if I felt really how bad that was for you, because at that point in my life, I was still feeling like as older people pass away, that's just a natural progression of life. Like I just wasn't like what you said, Mindy, what you don't know, you don't know.
Yeah. And I think as you get older, you realize, 72 is not old.
Right. Right.
Yes.
Like that's a young age to die. That's when my dad was 73. And I think, so my dad's been gone 12 years. Think of how long 12 years of life, if he'd still been here, like that's a lot of life he didn't get to live. So yeah, I think that comes with age too.
Yeah. But I guess like in the do not, category, I think sometimes we may not be saying or doing something because we don't even realize the impact and the enormity of what's happened.
Yeah, that's very true. And that is probably even more so with other kinds of losses, like job losses or just sickness or disappointments, because I think it's important to remember that you don't just grieve the loss of people. You can grieve the loss of other things in your life, your way of life, your dreams, your lifestyle. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Jobs, places. So,
all right. What else should we not be doing, Julie?
Don't offer unsolicited advice that you may not be qualified to give, i.e. medical advice.
But we're all so smart now. We have a MD degree right in our pocket.
Right. And that is very funny because we got lots of treatment option advice for John. And, it's like, well, John is a doctor and we're at a great cancer center, like cutting edge, I think
I have a friend, Julie. I have a friend that, no, I read on the internet.
Yeah. Okay. So. Point taken.
Yes. But, I'm not judging anybody that said any of those things for me because their intentions were good.
I thought of something the other day and I was reading up on like extended fasts, and it was there was this thing, and I was like, oh, I wonder if Julie and John have like talked about this particular area. I was like, hey, they know what they're doing. I really like, I'm just telling you, I had that thought, and I got my, I like, ugh, I like told myself to be quiet, because you have these thoughts. You're like, I wonder, because you care about that person. And
Right.
so you're going to have thoughts, but I think, a good healthy dose of self-control on your words there.
Mhm.
I'll say,
Right.
even with the job loss thing, it comes differently, but Bryce and I both talked about it, and we just felt like with certain conversations that we were having, there were a lot of questions, and we felt like we had to prove to people that we were doing enough to try to find a job. Like,
Mhm.
oh, have you tried this? Well, what about this? Well, how did that go? Well, when are they supposed to call back? And we just felt like there were a lot of questions, that those conversations about trying to find a job were very uncomfortable. Like, we were always having to prove that we were working hard at trying to find a job. And so it just
Yeah.
put us in a really uncomfortable position. We're like, I promise it's
Mhm.
every thought. Like, it really is. It's every thought. We're doing our best. Okay.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
Yep. Another one is to not judge people how they grieve. And I know there used to be that stages of grief timeline, and that seems to be being debunked now. Like, don't think of grief as linear. Like, okay, I've gone through this stage, so now I'm going to go through this, and then you're done.
Mm.
It kind of ebbs and flows. People say it comes in waves. Like, you could be doing great, and then some thought comes in your mind or a situation, and you're just sunk,
Mhm.
But then you might come back stronger than you were before, like different places on the quote timeline. And I know I have wrongly thought of people in certain situations. Like, I haven't said this to them, but in my mind, I've thought, oh, it just seems like they should be past that by now. Or it's really been long enough, hadn't it? Like, this happened 10 years ago. And, and the hard part to read in these people's writings is that grief never goes away. And it's like, oh, I just hate to hear that. But it's not
Right.
that it stays the same, but it's just always a part of you.
Or I would imagine that if you have something hard going on, but people see you having a good time, then they might think, oh, well, she's not being respectful enough of that grief, or boy, she seems like she's fine with it, or whatever.
Well, I guess
like,
that's
you
true.
could be
Like,
judging
your grief
people
maybe
that way
wasn't
too.
long enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah. Or if they see you doing something fun, everything's great.
Mm-hmm.
She's past it.
No,
Yeah.
it's not all great. There are great things, but it's not all great. Like they coexist.
Yeah.
Don't expect a response in return. And I really appreciated people telling me that. Like, I have friends say, I'm going to text you every week, or I had a friend texting me scripture verses every day, or prayers, or just encouraging, messages. And they always said, I don't expect you to respond. And that was nice. Like, in the initial stages when John was in the hospital, it was just too much to keep up with all that. But I read them all. And now it is kind of fun to communicate and keep up because I have the time. But there are times when there's a lot going on, and you can't. So that is just a nice thing to say to somebody, not expecting long conversations.
Sure. Yeah. I think that's one of the reasons that people are sometimes even hesitant to drop off meals or maybe say they want meals, is because there's that awkwardness of, oh, well, here's your meal, and now you have to make small talk. And it's like, could people just put the meal on the porch and go and never even see me or talk to me? Like, I don't know. I think sometimes maybe that's just too much. Either the person is still trying to recover from birth or surgery or illness, and they don't want to have to put on a okay face, or they're just too much in grief from something that's happened, or like, it could be don't even expect a response at all. to whatever you've done. Like, just if you could just drop something off, but then you don't know, hey, is that offensive? But I think probably maybe they want you to err on the side of just dropping and going. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, that was actually one of the things on the don't list that I didn't include. Was it was like, don't show up at somebody's house uninvited, and don't ring the doorbell when you drop something off. But I would say that there were times when I appreciated that, but then sometimes I would want the visit. So maybe it's just good to ask. Like, I can do either, just what do you want?
True.
Yeah.
I definitely have a horror story, and I'll call it a horror story. I had just had my fourth baby, and you need meals because you physically just can't, provide for your family during those early days of coming home with baby. This sweet family provided a meal. They rang the doorbell. They talked for such a long time. They ended up staying and eating the meal with us. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so worn out. Like,
yeah,
you just got all the fluids coming. You got all the kids, and you're not like together for company, let alone your house being able. And I was like, here I am serving you the meal you brought me. So don't do that. Don't stay and eat the meal that you provide.
Okay, unless your husband invites them to do that.
That's different. Oh, Julie.
I can say that we shared many meals that were brought to me with babies with them, but that's what and it was fine. It was fine.
That's what he needed.
Yeah,
so you hear both sides there. Okay.
Yeah.
To me, it was a horror story. To Julie, it's like, oh, yay, friends.
All right. Well, this one was, don't compare their situation to someone else's, like saying, my friend Rachel went through the same thing and she's totally fine now. So that's kind of what we already talked about, that my mistake was trying to give someone hope by saying, well, this situation worked out, so will yours,
It negates their pain, negates their suffering. Like, she's fine, so you should be too.
And it kind of downplays, they're grieving. Like, and this is a little off topic, but I thought it was a good place to put this. Like, when John has his scans, you're just anticipating, like, this could go this way or this could go this way. Like, it's going to be this defining moment. And there's so much anxiety around it and what you're going to tell people. And obviously, it could be bad news and that would be horrible. But good news, it's like, oh, well, people could just say, oh, that's so great, and then forget about us. It's like either way has anxiety over it. So, you don't want to be forgotten. And then good things don't negate the bad. Like, you just can't spin cancer. There's just nothing that you can say to spin it to where it's still not a horrific thing. But good things happen in the middle of it. Yes, all the time. And so that's kind of where, like, when somebody asks you how you're doing, you feel like you've got to give this verdict on your life. Like, it's a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And it's not, you can't do that. You can't, it's like, well, there's a little of this and there's a little of that.
Yeah.
So like, as a listener, it might be a good idea to, if they say fine, if they're a good friend, you might dig a little deeper.
Right.
Right.
Like, tell me something good and tell me something hard,
I was thinking about John's scans, and John's scans aren't just one and done. They're every month. So
every 2. Yeah.
Oh, every 2 months. Okay. Yeah. So you get a good verdict, but I'm sure a month in, you're already starting to think about, well, the next one's going to come up. Is that going to be a good verdict? And he has a lot of other physical symptoms that don't go away just because he had a good verdict. Like, there's so much involved. Whereas if you have a friend that was dealing with breast cancer and she gets the all clear, that might be for the next year. She doesn't have to go back. And so she really can celebrate thinking, oh, well, for the foreseeable future, at least, they've told me that I can, do my normal things. And she's probably starting then a physical recovery where John is never really starting a physical recovery. He's always sick. Yes.
And his scan results being great is not reflected in the way he feels. So that's hard, and we certainly are very, very grateful and thankful when he gets a good scan. So I hesitate to even talk about this for fear of it making me sound ungrateful. But I'm just saying that it doesn't mean that life over here is just all hunky dory. And I get the impression that maybe that's what some people think, like that don't see us, because that does sound like, well, that's the best news. It's the best news possible, but it's, it doesn't change a lot of things. But I'm not ungrateful.
Right. Well, there's a lot of things that we shouldn't do, for sure. And I think we're all guilty of doing some of them. But what can we do? Because I think that a lot of times we're just at a loss for ideas. Like I said, once we hit meals off, well, I don't know. What do you think they need?
Yeah. And it would depend on the situation, of course. Like there are different times in an illness when you need certain things and then you don't need those. And
yeah. So have you come across any lists of things that people should think about doing?
Yeah, I have a good list here. And like I said, this wouldn't just be for every situation and all the time, but there's times for them. Like obviously meal train, I think that's the first thing anybody thinks about is food. And we probably had 3 months of meal trains, and that was so helpful. And either meals or meal cards, where we could order food. And it was nice, like you said, Marie, like when our family was all together, like Molly was here and the boys were home. I think we used those meal cards a couple of times, like for a birthday dinner or something big, where we didn't have the energy to celebrate by me cooking and baking and all that. So that was really nice. Help caring for pets. That's not something I've needed, but that's a great idea. Like if my dog needed walking or wanted to walk. But he doesn't. So
drag Charlie around the block.
Yeah.
Offering to drive kids to and from school and activities. I think, Marie, you probably appreciated that when Davis was sick. And Mindy, something you've experienced. This is one that has been probably the most appreciated for me, is just checking in weekly. I've got a friend in Texas, and she texts me every Thursday. And it's really special because she knows John's in treatment on Thursday. So that's like an added layer of, I remember what your Thursdays are like. And, she hasn't forgotten. And that's special. And it's not, it's just, hey, I'm praying for you. I hope today goes good. Hope John's feeling good. I think sometimes, like, I've probably been too quiet in situations that I need to, because I don't know what to say. It doesn't have to be profound. You don't have to find this perfect scripture and, sometimes I just think, what can I say? But just, I'm thinking about you,
Right.
One thing I hear a lot is that support falls away after a few months, like if you've lost someone, which, we're not in that situation, but I just thought this is a good time to talk about it because a friend at church lost her husband several years ago. And I remember seeing like a Facebook post about his birthday. And I thought, it might have been one of those memories, that pops up. And I thought, that must be so painful to have to see that. And but then I started noticing people were commenting like, we miss him so much. He was such a great friend. And they were kind of sharing memories and stories. And now I get that. Like that would be appreciated, that you'd want people to talk about him, and not just ignore it.
Right.
I found one. It said, create a playlist of uplifting music. I don't know. I mean, that, that might be if someone loves music. Make a gift basket filled with their favorite things. That's a great idea just because it would make you feel known. But, if they knew what your favorite things were. Offer your time, your ears, your heart. And Mindy, that's probably what you were looking for on walks. And time is a good gift. I saw set up a prayer chain. Now, this is a great idea because I've actually asked for this early on in text groups, but why not? Let's offer that to somebody that's going through something. Like that would be great to say, how can we pray for you? And like, let's get this group together to do it. So I'm trying to remember some of these for myself. It's just because I'm grieving doesn't mean I'm not around other people that are as well. Run an errand for somebody, offer to pick something up from the store. And this was really helpful in the early days of John's illness. And my pastor's wife would call me occasionally and say, hey, I'm going to Trader Joe's. Can I pick up something for you? I mean, she would insist like, no, I'm here. What can I get? And sometimes it would be like with some flowers and just really nice. And I thought, I've tried to do that recently, like even just as a nice gesture, like, well, hey, I'm here. I know you like the store. What could I get you?
Mm-hmm.
Helping with household chores. Now, this one would be the hardest for me. I've never really had anybody offer this, and I think I might have to say no. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be able to accept that very easily?
I actually had people offer after the twins were born, and I'm not comfortable with it. And I guess maybe if I broke my leg and my arm.
And you just couldn't.
He's like, how hurt do I have to be to let somebody come in here?
Totally paralyzed.
Yeah.
I just feel so uncomfortable. But I don't have a cleaning person. Like, I don't have anybody doing that in my everyday life. So I think probably I haven't ever had to get used to somebody doing something like that for me. So I think like maybe once the barrier was broken, I could. But yeah, I don't know. I'm comforted to hear that other people might have a hard time accepting that too.
When I always think like, well, if you see me at church or you see me out in the world, then I'm capable of cleaning my house. Like I think of it as I'm not there yet, or I don't, you know what I mean? Like you, Maureen, I'd have to be paralyzed to not.
I know. I think, have I died? No, then I can do it. Because even when I broke my little pinky toe, like those first couple of days, like every little errand, every little step was like excruciating. So even thinking about changing the sheets on my bed, which I always wash the sheets on my bed every Monday, I was like, okay, my options are going without it, expecting Bryce to do it, like asking him to do it, or like nothing. I mean,
right.
I think I think I can muster up the strength to do this. And then it wears, like you have nothing left. Like, but I do think like, well, am I dead? No. Okay, then you can do it.
Yeah.
Right.
So I guess maybe if you've offered to help somebody with chores and they say no, don't feel offended, because it's hard for some people to accept that. Like it would be easier for me to accept other ways of help than it would be for me to say, yes, come into my home and do my chores. I would, even if my own mother offered, it would be hard for me to say yes.
Yeah. Now, my mom does offer sometimes, and I do let her do it because I know she really does want to do it.
Well, I don't even think it's that I don't think the other person wants to do it. I really do believe the other person is wanting and sincere. It just makes me feel so uncomfortable that I can't say yes.
Well, I guess my mom has seen my dirt, so I feel a little more, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
She's used to it.
I guess if there was anybody that I would let do it, it would be my mom.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that we can do, Julie, besides household chores?
Let's see. There's offered a ride to a doctor's appointment. I guess if the person that is your friend is sick themselves, that would be a nice thing. Or if they can't drive, invite someone to do something nice or fun, like they said, a spa day or something. And I thought this was good. Like, don't be afraid to invite friends to do something fun. Like, I think it would be easy to talk yourself out of it and say, no, they're probably not in the mood for that, or they're not ready for that. Like, let them decide. Don't make that decision for them. Like, it's very nice to have the invitation, even if you have to turn it down, you know?
Right.
You'd rather be
to
turning
know
down
that people were
invitations
thinking of you.
Yeah.
No, I that totally makes sense. It's always better to throw the invitation out there.
So that's all I had. I hope that was helpful.
I'd like to add one to just one thought that I had is inevitably somebody's going to say something or do something wrong in your grief season. And I just think for the person that's suffering, you end up needing to forgive the hurts or the things that other people do that they don't know are hurtful. Does that make sense? So I was just thinking for the person that's suffering, trying to just let that pass, try to let it, shake off. Don't let words or hurts or, think advice or things like that to really penetrate that friendship, to be readily able to forgive that person. Because a lot of people don't know, and things will be said and things will be done that are hurtful. And so trying to remember it's done out of, hopefully done out of a place of love, and, you know, that their intentions were good. But anyways, just not to get, hopefully those things don't completely change your relationship with that person.
Yeah, that's a good word. And I have a friend that I've talked to, and she'll question, like, well, why do you feel that way? And why are you doing this? And not in a, we're not arguing, or I'm not offended by it at all, but I can truly tell she just doesn't get it. And I'll try to explain, and she's like, I just don't understand, you know. And through her, I've kind of learned, like, well, good, I'm glad you don't understand, you know, but I hope you never understand, because at least through firsthand knowledge, you know. So yeah, I mean, people are trying, and you can't hold someone at fault for not understanding, but I do know she's trying, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, grief and hard times can change friendships. And Julie, you're probably the most recent, but do you feel like your friendships have changed throughout this process?
I mean, not really and this question maybe sounded like it was something negative, but I think you have different needs from your friends, and so it changes from the griever's perspective. Like, things that you used to rely on from your spouse, now your friends meet those needs some way. Like, I mean, I haven't lost John, but there's just things he can't or doesn't do anymore, you know? Like, he doesn't go to the movies anymore. And I thought, well, am I never going to go to a movie again? You know, and he wants me to go to a movie. So, like, I called Marie and we went to see a movie, you know, like, and it's kind of scary, because it's like you're putting a little more weight on that friendship. Like, if you had called and canceled, it would have been a little more devastating than
before.
Yeah, it's like, friends include you. Friends are gracious, but they really only include you, like, when they want to or can. Like, it's not like a spouse who's just always there and available. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, you're kind of just at the mercy of whoever wants to include you. Like, you know, if that makes sense.
Right. No, it does make sense. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense, because I'm thinking about even the mom who is essentially grieving the loss of her child going to college. And maybe that child was, you know, somebody that she spent a lot of time with. Well, now all of a sudden she's free. And so, like, friendships will change. I remember when I had one friend that she was like, well, I don't have anybody to go to the movies with. Like, my girl left, and she's like, who do I go shopping with? Who do I go to get my nails done with? Or, you know, just anything that she did with that child, you know, when that child leaves, it's like you have this emptiness. And so you know, that is a grieving season of letting kids go and leave the house. And it's just, your life changes. So it changes friendships, because then you need people in a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Julie, I really appreciate you spearheading this and looking up so many things and sharing, because I do think that a lot of us want to be better at walking with a friend through difficult times. And a lot of us are at a loss, and we're kind of uncomfortable with maybe how we've handled things in the past. Even if we don't remember what our specific thing was, we're like, we still have this nagging feeling that we just didn't quite do it right, but we don't know exactly what it was. We can't put our finger on it.
It just didn't feel good.
Yeah. Hopefully this episode kind of made our thoughts more clear, and maybe what we should be doing moving forward more clear. So
I hope so.
Yeah, we hope this was helpful for you listeners. But we do want to switch gears. And before we go, we always end our show with I'm a fan. So, Julie, what are you a fan of this week?
All right. I am a fan of an author, and her name is Clarissa Moll, Moll. And she's an author, and she's a host at Christianity Today magazine's podcast called Surprised by Grief. So yes, this is still about grief, but she writes kind of in a short format on Instagram every day. And her tagline says she gives honest, soulful grief support. And if anybody wants to learn more about grief support or is needing it, she is excellent. She, in her early 30s, she was on a family vacation with 4 kids and her husband. They were very outdoorsy. They lived in the Seattle area. And her husband got up early to hike around Mount Rainier and fell to his death. And literally, they come to her campsite and have to tell her that her husband's gone. So she has a very different story of a sudden loss, but she was young, 4 kids, and I think it's only been like 3 years, and she's written every day since then.
Oh.
And it's been interesting to see how she's grown and changed. And so she's just come out with a new book called Beyond the Darkness. So I have not read it yet, but I'm going to be buying it.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing. I'm sure she has a lot of good advice that we can glean from walking through.
Yeah. And you can find her on Instagram at Moll Clarissa is her name. MOLLCLARISSA.
Okay. Well, good. Thank you for sharing that, Julie. Mindy, what are you a fan of this week?
There is a podcast episode that was helpful to me to learn kind of a what not to do from a biblical perspective.
Oh.
Tim Keller did a series on suffering, but he also did the podcast was specifically called Miserable Comforters. And it talks about it talks about Job's friends and kind of from a what not to do standpoint and a what to do standpoint. And I just felt that it was very, very helpful for me to listen to. And so I'll try to find that episode and share it with you guys so that we can post a link to it. But I remembered it. I listened to it several years ago, and I remember it to this day. So I think it was helpful to me.
Yeah.
And,
I do remember seeing that title, Mindy, and none of us want to be a miserable comforter.
Exactly. Don't be like Job's friends.
All right. Well, I am a fan this week of a TV show, and maybe if you just want to drown your sorrows in something, you could watch this. You guys kept up with the theme, but I kind of went off into something else. But anyways, this is a really popular series on Netflix right now. You may have seen it, The Lincoln Lawyer. And it's not the movie that came out in 2011. It is
Matthew McConaughey.
No. It's a 10-series show, but it is based on the novels by Michael Connelly, which also the previous movie was. But the previous movie was based on the first novel, and the series is based on the second novel. So I've actually never seen the movie. I think I might see if I can find it streaming anywhere because I did enjoy the series. But it's a 10-episode series, and it became an immediate hit when it was released on May 13th of this year. And so we just finished watching it in a week with our son that's home from college because we all like to watch this kind of thing. And it basically follows Mickey Haller, an idealist criminal defense attorney in Los Angeles who runs his practice out of the back seat of his Lincoln. He believes everyone deserves their day in court and takes on the underdog with a level of compassion this world could use a lot more of. And it was just a good series. I mean, I'll say a caveat, it did have a few F words, but not overwhelming. But I would say that was the worst thing about it. Like, I liked it. I thought the stories were interesting. It has one overarching story throughout the 10 series and then kind of little stories in each episode. And we all three really enjoyed it. So if you're just looking for a series this summer, we thought The Lincoln Lawyer was really good.
Good. I need a new series.
Do you? Okay. And Julie, I honestly don't feel like this is too scary for you or anything.
Oh, it doesn't sound scary. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys for sharing your successes and your failures as far as walking with friends. And listeners, we hope that this has been helpful. If you want to email us this week, our email address is midlifematterspodcast@gmail.com, or you can always find us on Instagram at Midlife Matters Podcast. Mindy and Julie, I look forward to talking with you next week.
All right.
All right. Sounds great.
Bye.
Okay, bye. We're so happy you joined us today. You can find the show notes for this episode at midlifematterspodcast.com. Also, please tell a friend about the show and help them hit the free subscribe button on their favorite podcast app. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Midlife Matters Podcast. That's where we post pictures and stories about all the things we talk about in each episode. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.